Okay, so I have a lot of sponsored video requests this week, things to get to. Today I was going to do something more along the lines of mental resiliency and fitness rather than sexual dynamics, but this is a topic that does need to be talked about and did come up recently, so we're going to address it. And that's the issue of statutory rape. That's what we're going to talk about, okay? Take the finger, slide it over, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and get on my list. There's a link. Click the link, and then I'll open up a thing for you to put your email address in there, because there will be content that I can't share on YouTube that I'll be developing every month and getting it out to you guys. All right. So let's get into this topic. First of all, some of you guys are going to think it's a bit white knighting for me to address this, and I don't really care, all right, what you think. That's your thoughts. We really do need to address it, and you need to address it for a number of reasons. As a man, you need to understand this. And women, of course, need to have this understanding too. And what we're going to get into is when I say statutory rape, I'm talking not like pedophilia stuff, okay? I'm not talking about, non-consensual children situations. I'm talking about that situation where like the 15-year-old girl is banging the 23, 24-year-old guy. All right, I'm talking about where a young girl who's not emotionally mature yet is hooking up with an adult male. All right. In most areas of the world, that is illegal and considered statutory rape, but it seems to be socially acceptable, though, if you hadn't noticed. Many girls and young girls were the teenager hooking up with dudes in college and adult men, okay, and have experienced that. And many of these women, unfortunately, this all came about, right, where I put something on my social media platform, Facebook or whatever, about this, and then I noticed a couple of other women had posted something on their platforms about this, and I was actually very proud of those women for doing that, because they had experienced this, we'll call it what it is, statutory rape scenario, and most of the time when girls have experienced this, they defend it. All right. So when she was 15 and her first sexual experience with some guy in her 20s, she's defending it because it's two reasons. One is either she doesn't want to be seen as the victim because she desired and wanted that scenario. And number two is because, she potentially was imprinted by that. And so that means that dude was an alpha for her. And so she wants to defend that as a good experience, right? But the problem is, it is very damaging, potentially damaging to young women, to the point where that incident can imprint them and hinder or destroy their ability to ever pair bond or be happy in any kind of relationship ever again. And it's being destroyed when they're too young to consensually make a decision because they're not emotionally mature enough. All right. Now, I know guys are going to ask, so why aren't we talking about like guys, like a 15-year-old boy sleeping with a adult female? Because that does happen too. It's a topic for maybe another video because the dynamic is completely different. I'm not saying that it's that young kid, like boys, okay, who are not emotionally mature enough yet, sleeping with an adult female. I'm not saying that those teenage boys aren't damaged from that, okay? But arguably, when we know and we compare what the biology and evolutionary biology and psychology, and we look at this stuff, with what we know now, it's arguably more damaging potentially for that female, all right? Now, it's not a contest to see who's damaging who the most. I get that. But it's just the dynamic is different when it's a male. So it's really a topic for another time. So we're going to focus on it being the female. And usually, statistically, that is happening more. And when these young women who've been through this are older, and they talk and they seem to support it, or they look back at it as being a good experience and they promote that as such, that's really frustrating because I know how damaging this can be to women and to young girls. And yet these, women who've experienced this, because either they don't want to be the victim or they look at that as, a imprinting experience for them, they are, they're promoting it. So in other words, like, it should be taboo and we should be rejecting this as a society, but when women are promoting it as a good idea, well, then it just opens more young girls up to being damaged. It's very frustrating. All right, so I do commend those women who are on their social media who had been through this and who are talking about this and calling it out what it is, which is basically a predatory relationship. Statutory rape is predatory, okay? Now, let's get into the science, why it's so bad, why it's so impacting, and why men should be aware of this, and of course, why women should be aware of it too. All right, so let's look at what we know through a red pill lens. All right, so we know that we know about hypergamy. If you've been paying any attention to me, or if you've picked up Rational Male book series, which I recommend all the time, you'll understand how hypergamy affects women. Okay, you understand that a woman cannot go backwards. All right, so once she experiences something with a man at a certain level, okay, she can't go, and it's amongst a number of categories, but she can't just go backwards and settle with somebody else that's less than that and be happy. So if she experiences what is perceived as a dominant sexual genetic option, and then she goes to, it doesn't work out with that guy, and then she goes to settle with somebody who's perceived as less dominant and less of an alpha sexual option, or less of a genetic, sexual option, she will never be happy with that guy. And so when we understand this fact about hypergamy, now maybe some light bulbs are going on for some of you guys as to why this might be really damaging to a young-ass girl, all right? So a 15-year-old, let's say, hooks up with that 23, 24-year-old. And of course she wants to. What 15-year-old isn't going to want to hook up with a young 20-year-old dude, right? Even just the size and physical maturity differential will never be repeated, all right? Let alone the mental dominance and the emotional maturity, okay? So let's do a math problem to illustrate this. So let's say a girl is 22 years old and she hooks up with a guy who's 8 years older. She is physically an adult and he is physically an adult. So she is fully developed, whereas, you got some pretty developed 15-year-olds out there, but generally speaking, there's quite a bit of development left from a girl when she's 15 to about age 20 or so, right? Whereas a 22-year-old girl is at her peak development. A guy who's 8 years older, he's fully developed adult male, And so a 22 to, 30-year-old or whatever, there isn't that physical differential. And they're both emotionally mature adults. Arguably, the 30-year-old should be more experienced and will have some dominance over her, right? But it's not that difference isn't so extreme, because you're not dealing with a kid and an adult. You're dealing with two adults, right? So this is not a potentially damaging situation. Could that 22-year-old be alpha widowed by the 30-year-old? Potentially, but that if it doesn't work out with a 30-year-old and she hooks up with, let's say, I don't know, a 23-year-old, that 23-year-old could be a more dominant, better option. You know what I mean? Like, we're dealing with adults here on that same plane. A 15-year-old to 23-year-old, okay, 8-year difference, you're dealing with someone, even on a physical level, less developed, more developed. And she has, that 15-year-old girl has all the hormones and desire of a normal woman. So she sexually desires this person like an adult woman, except she's not emotionally mature either. 15-year-old girl is going to have very erratic emotions. So being alpha widowed isn't objective. It's her subjective perception of the experience. So this 15-year-old girl is experiencing this older adult man who is probably or arguably physically more developed, mentally, emotionally, has a lot more power over her than she'll ever experience again in her life for most people that this happens to. Because by the time she's an adult, she won't be in that position because she'll be matching other adults at that point where there will be this emotional and mental maturity difference where she'll have that much dominance over her. So what effectively happens here, even if that 23-year-old guy is a total douchebag, and they usually are, and emotionally immature himself, and he can't hang with other 23-year-olds. He can't bag hot 21-year-olds his own age, right? Probably, a lot of times. When he's bagging that 23-year-old, though, the difference is so great that she may never experience that difference again, which means that through her subjective lens, she just experienced the most alpha, best genetic option she'll ever experience ever again at 15 to a guy who's a 23-year-old douchebag. Even when she logically knows the guy's a 23-year-old douchebag later, you know, when she meets and sees him later in life as an adult and looks through her adult lens and understands that the guy ain't shit, when she was 15 and going through that experience, her hormones, emotions. Now imagine too, it's her first sexual experience. Her hormones, emotions, all that stuff for that guy. How is a guy gonna match that when she hits adulthood? How is a guy supposed to beat that? Now, there are guys out there that are very dominant men, right? That extreme alphas, total chads, that'll erase that experience for her, like it won't matter. You know what I mean? But how many of those guys are gonna, what's the likelihood of her finding her unicorn that she needs to find so she's no longer an alpha widow from an experience she had when she was 15? What's that likelihood for her, right? Because you're talking a shortage of dominant men now. You maybe have 10 to 15% of guys now that qualify as alpha, maybe. And just being alpha isn't going to be enough because the guy can't just be alpha. He's got to make up for this huge differential in both physical development as well as mental and emotional development that she experienced. You see what I'm saying? Since she can't go backwards, she won't pair bond. She'll never respect, love, admire her partner going forward. No matter how good the guy is, no matter how whatever. Unless that guy is dominant enough and enough of a, like just such a genetic specimen, okay, that he just fucking just destroys, okay, that alpha widowing that she experienced. She's done. Do you understand that? She'll never really be happy. She'll go through the honeymoon phase. She'll have a lot of promise and good feelings about guys that she gets with, and then those feelings will erode because they won't be perceived as her best. Even if those guys are objectively better than some 23-year-old loser that she hooked up with, through her subjective experience of a 15-year-old with this adult man, okay, it'll never be the same. She will never experience that again. She's effectively destroyed from ever being able to be happy in a commitment for the rest of her life. That is high fucking stakes, if you ask me. That's pretty high consequence, all right? A lot of girls don't like to hear that, especially ones who've been through this, because they want to kick and scream and sputter and say, well, that's not true, because of feelings, right? This is the science. I don't care about you. The science doesn't care about your feelings. Facts don't care. And sputtering about it isn't going to change it, okay? What's going to change it is recognizing it and then figuring out what to do about it, all right? And understanding what you might need to do to break this widowing that's happened. And for guys, you need to understand this too, because if you're with some girl is happy with you and you're thinking long-term relationship or you're thinking permanent situation, and she was 15 banging a 16 years old, banging a 27-year-old or something when she was younger, what do you think that likelihood is that you're topping that experience for her? Could be it could be the case, but right? It's a red flag now, isn't it? Because you're about to give your commitment away, maybe go through the real dumb idea of putting a ring on it and, combining your finances and even having children with this person who will never love you, never respect you, never have that awe and admiration or those emotions for you that she had with her first love, who was an adult male when she was just a fucking kid. You see the problem now? You see why it's so damaging? Do you see why you can't let your daughters do this shit? Because the potentiality for them ruining themselves forever is there. Do you see, if you're a woman watching this, do you see why, even if this happened to you, you cannot sit here and promote this as a good idea? Recognize it for what it is, which is that guy who was in his 20s banging you when you were 15 is not a badge of honor for you. He was a total loser douchebag who has to bang 15-year-olds when he's in his 20s. You know what I mean? Versus a fully developed and hot 21, 22-year-old. He's a loser who banged you when you were 15. That's not a badge of honor. You need to stop acting like it is. All right? And you need to talk about this for what it is, which is a predatory relationship. That person who did that is a predator, a sexual predator, and they need to be seen as such and treated as such. Because we need to stop accepting this kind of stuff in our society, okay? Because this kind of stuff is how women get damaged forever before they even have a fucking chance. I mean, if a woman damages herself by being stupid and, riding all the dicks she can find or whatever and, just whatever, okay, that's on her, right? I mean, that's her. But when she's not really emotionally mature enough to make a consensual decision, because she's still kind of just a kid, and she is having that ability ruined for her, that is just unquestionably horrible, right? And we need to make sure we're speaking against that stuff and doing something about it. Not letting our daughters get into those situations. Taking it seriously if some young girl is running off with some 20-something-year-old. Beating that dude's face in and throwing him in fucking jail if that's what he's doing. For real. Now, I mean, do 15-year-olds show up at college parties and lie about their age all the time? Yeah, of course they do. So this is why you got to watch your kids. All right? Why is your 15-year-old at a college party? Where the hell are you watching your daughter, man? 16, 17-year-old. Arguably 18 is that age of consent, but even then, there's not like she has her 18th birthday and then magically she's a mature adult. All right? So somewhere between the age of 18 and 21, her brain will complete at least the emotional maturity part. Brains have plasticity and they're always going to develop. Emotional maturity is based on experiences, so that will continue to develop, but at least so she can be a consensual adult, it's somewhere between 18 and 21. If you're looking at a commitment with somebody, if you're looking at having long-term success with somebody, as a man, you have to have not the empty confidence, but the objective understanding that she perceives you as her sexual best, as her best genetic option. Best she could get and best she's ever been with. If she's been with somebody who's older, an adult, when she was a kid, arguably that experience could have been impacting enough for her where that'll never be the case for you, no matter who you are, what you do. So, be aware of that, okay? I should say, I'll end with this, because a lot of girls are going to listen to this and be like, I hate him. He speaks the truth, and I don't like it, and I thought it was great I slept with this guy in his 20s when I was 15. Okay, so, look, there's a chance, it's not necessarily, it's a red flag, but it's not but it's not necessarily a death sentence. The reason why it's not a death sentence is because, all right, so I need to add this caveat. The reason why it's not a death sentence is because, a lot of times that 20-something-year-old guy is emotionally immature, sometimes even physically immature, kind of he's not the Chad usually, right? And so he's not impacting or imprinting that young girl potentially, the way that it could happen, and sometimes her emotions might not actually be that high, even if he was her first. And sometimes she doesn't, have an orgasm because she doesn't know what her body's like when she's a young girl and she's not sure how to have one yet. And these can save her ass, okay? Because if it is an orgasmic, very sexually imprinting experience, and there's that differential, she could be done forever. Like, it doesn't matter, right? Like I said, it doesn't matter if her guys, when she's an adult, are better. It's the subjective experience, and that differential is too great to make up, But oftentimes most of the time, it's not the high value 20-something-year-old who's hooking up with the teenage girl. So it oftentimes isn't quite so imprinting, right? And if she gets lucky and wins even if it was imprinting, she could get lucky and bag that, extreme alpha that erases that experience for her, because he is such a better genetic option, better genetic fit, and executes such a dominant behavior both in and out of the bedroom that it really renders that experience kind of useless for her. That's a hope for her, right? And then there's that hope that really it wasn't that impacting for her, that she got lucky, But the potentiality, though, is very great. It's too great for that damage to happen. And if you're one of my listeners, right, and you're like in your early 20s, don't go bagging young ass girls, man. Don't do it. Don't do it. Okay? It's predatory. All right? Don't be a sexual predator. I know they all have all the parts and all the desires of a woman, okay? But they're not a woman. They're not a woman yet. So don't do that. Don't do that to yourself. Don't open yourself up to legal risk, for one. And for two, it's all about, you got to wake up and look in the mirror the next day. All right? That's it. I know there's, if a woman ruins herself with her own behavior and you're a part of that, that's one thing. But if you're in a predatory relationship, that's something different. There's too many women out there. There's too many hot women who are in their 20, 21, 22, 23 years old that you don't need to mess around with some 15-year-old. You're pretty much a loser who has no game if you're doing that, honestly. You need to be talking to me, getting on my channel, and learning how to do well with women so you can so you can be with hotter ass women in their 20s, not being a predator on some 15-year-old. You know what I'm saying? And so if that's you're listening, take that message to heart. It's not talked about enough. Don't be a pussy, okay? Be a fucking Chad, and Chads don't fuck kids, all right? It's to be real about it. You know what I mean? We not even teens, not even ambiguously might be kids in their brain, okay? Game adults, all right? This is an adult thing, okay? We want to have productive relationships with people. We want to have productive as men. We want to have productive and good relationships with women, whether we're dating, whether they're just friends, or whether we're in long-term situations with them. And so kind of hard to have that if women are ruining their ability to do that. And one surefire way to do that, to ruin it for a lot of girls, is to have a statutory rape situation that, of course, she is consenting to as a kid, but that just imprints and ruins it for her. So that's it, guys and gals. We need to be very clear about this. You need to understand from a scientific, biological, evolutionary perspective why this is bad. This is not an opinion. I mean, hell, when I was World War II generation, 15, 16-year-old girls got married to 20-something-year-old guys all the time, right? Whatever, stuff like that would happen, but that was pre-science, okay? And we're not in a situation of hunter-gatherer tribes where we're dead at 30 and we start spitting babies out at 15 years old. We're in a situation where people expect to be fulfilled and happy in their relationships until they're 85 years old, is roughly around the life expectancy now. All right, that's a lot different than 200,000 years of evolution where our life expectancy was only 30. You know what I mean? Even in World War II generation, I think that our life expectancy was probably in their 60s, I think it was, and it's 20 years higher than that now. So my point is, just because something was happened with your grandparents or something, that doesn't make it okay now. We have science, we understand things, and we live longer, and we expect more out of our relationships. All right, and so don't think that this is ever okay. Okay, don't, because we have the evidence, the data to prove how damaging it is to young girls. So just don't do it. If you're a guy in this position, don't do it. It's not about being a white knight. It's just about, protecting our society, and it's protecting the vulnerable. Okay, and women have the ability to choose and make their own choices when they're adults, so they're not necessarily vulnerable as adults when it comes to their sexual decisions. But when they're kids or teenagers, they absolutely are, and we need to be, vocal about that. We need to make sure that we do things about that when those opportunities arise. All right, hopefully you have an understanding of this. You can take this understanding, apply it to your life, your situation. Thanks for the support.